June 6, 1944. Allied paratroopers were landing on the Normandy coast. German commanders had to make an urgent decision: mobilize Panzer reserves. But no one could make the decision, because Panzer reserves required special approval. From Berlin, from the leader. The situation was reported to the leader. After a long delay, approval finally came. Panzers can move. 6 hours had passed. Allied air forces had secured air superiority. Panzers were bombed on the road. They were late. Rommel, when he returned to headquarters in the evening, asked, "Why didn't the Panzers move in the morning?" Answer: "Waited for approval." Rommel: "But I've been saying for months, Panzers should have been on the coast." He could somewhat predict the answer. The leader didn't trust him. June 1944, the month of D-Day. But Germany's most famous general had not been fully authorized by the leader. Tank reserves were not in his hands. His defense plan was restricted. Why? Because the leader didn't trust Rommel. He was suspicious. Perhaps he wasn't sure of Rommel's loyalty. And this suspicion would determine D-Day's fate. This is that story. The story of the trust rift between Rommel and the leader. How did it start? Why did it deepen? And how did it become disaster on D-Day? Before we begin the story, please hit the like button. It helps us reach more people with these forgotten stories. If you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the story. At the beginning, there was trust between Hitler and Rommel. February 1941, Hitler sent Rommel to North Africa. Mission: save the Italians. Stop British advance. Rommel exceeded expectations. He didn't just defend. He attacked. In 2 weeks, he began pushing the British back from Libya. March-April 1941, Rommel retook half of Libya, besieged Tobruk. Propaganda victory in Berlin. The Desert Fox nickname. Rommel became a national hero. Hitler was pleased. Rommel was aggressive and successful. Exactly the type of commander Hitler liked. But the first crack began during this period, because Rommel didn't fully obey Berlin's orders. March 1941, Berlin's order: stay on defense. Don't make major offensive. Rommel ignored it. Attacked. Succeeded. Berlin couldn't complain, because the result was victory. But in Hitler's mind, a question formed: does Rommel obey orders? Summer 1942, Rommel's brightest period. Tobruk fell. Rommel advanced to Egypt, reached El Alamein. The Suez Canal was 200 kilometers away. Hitler promoted Rommel to field marshal rank, the youngest German field marshal, at 50 years old. But during the same period, complaints in Berlin were increasing. Commanders complained that Rommel was undisciplined. Rommel constantly requested reinforcements. But resource allocation was Berlin's decision. Rommel didn't like the decisions and openly criticized them. August 1942, Rommel came to Berlin, met with Hitler face-to-face. 2-hour meeting. Rommel requested more resources for Africa. Hitler: Eastern Front is priority. Africa, second place. Rommel: but we can take Suez. This changes the war. Hitler: Soviets are more important. Africa will wait. Rommel was disappointed, and this disappointment reflected on Hitler. After the meeting, Hitler to those around him: Rommel is talented but stubborn. Sometimes doesn't see the big picture. This comment was a sign of the first cooling in the relationship. October 1942, Montgomery attacked at El Alamein. Rommel defended, but resources were insufficient. Tanks were suffering fuel shortages. November 2nd, Rommel made the withdrawal decision. The Africa Corps should withdraw to Libya before being annihilated. But Hitler sent a stand-your-ground order. No withdrawal. Every inch of ground will be defended. Rommel tried to obey the order for 2 days. But November 4th, military reality was clear. Staying in place meant annihilation. Rommel withdrew, violating Hitler's order. This was a breaking point for Hitler. A field marshal had directly violated orders. In terms of military discipline, this was unacceptable. But he couldn't relieve Rommel, because Rommel was a folk hero, a propaganda symbol. Relieving him would be a blow to morale. Hitler kept Rommel in duty. But trust was shaken. November 1942, Rommel sent a report to Berlin. Title: The Loss of El Alamein and Reasons. In the report, he attributed the failure in Africa to resource insufficiency. Supply lines couldn't be protected. Naval forces were inadequate. Panzers didn't arrive on time. Hitler read the report, but interpreted it this way: Rommel is blaming others for his mistake, not taking responsibility. There was partial truth in this interpretation. Rommel was indeed complaining about resource problems, but at the same time, he was also overlooking some tactical errors. In Hitler's mind, Rommel's image began to change. Talented but unreliable, takes credit when successful, blames others when unsuccessful. December 1942, Rommel temporarily returned to Germany due to health issues. Someone else was appointed in his place. During this period, distance increased between Hitler and Rommel. They were no longer as close as before. July 1943, Allies landed in Sicily. Italy was under threat. Hitler gave Rommel a new assignment: organize defense lines in northern Italy. But this assignment was vague. What exactly was Rommel authorized to do? Did he have command over Italian units? There were no clear instructions from Berlin. August 1943. While Rommel was working in Italy, contact with Hitler was limited. Reports were being sent, but direct meetings were few. September 1943. Italy surrendered. The situation became chaotic. Rommel disarmed Italian units, established German control in northern Italy. During this process, Rommel took initiative, made decisions without waiting for approval from Berlin. Because the situation required rapid action, Hitler appreciated Rommel's quick decisions. But at the same time, he said Rommel is acting on his own again. October 1943, Rommel was called to Berlin. Meeting with Hitler. Agenda: Italy defense strategy. Rommel's proposal: establish defense line in northern Italy. Abandon the south. Concentrate resources in the north. Hitler's strategy: defend the south too. Every inch of ground matters. No withdrawal. The two strategies conflicted. Rommel was pragmatic. Hitler was ideological. The debate intensified. Rommel explained military logic. Hitler emphasized political necessities. Finally, Hitler made his decision. The South will be defended too. My strategy is not debatable. Rommel obeyed the order, but internal conflict grew. After meeting, Hitler to those close to him: Rommel only thinks militarily, doesn't understand political reality. This assessment was partially correct. Rommel didn't think politically. He focused on military logic. But Hitler's political strategy was leading to military disaster, and Rommel saw this. November 1943, Rommel was assigned to a new duty: strengthening the Atlantic Wall. November 1943, Hitler was anxious. Where would the Allies attack after Italy? Probably France. Normandy or Pas-de-Calais. The Atlantic Wall was strong on paper, but in reality, Hitler wasn't sure. Rommel was given the task: inspect the Atlantic Wall, identify weaknesses, strengthen. This assignment was a new chance for Rommel. The defeat in Africa was behind him. Now, he would play a critical role in Europe's defense. December 1943 to January 1944, Rommel toured the French coasts: Normandy, Brittany, Pas-de-Calais. Examined every beach, every fortification. What he saw was disappointing. The Atlantic Wall wasn't as strong as propaganda claimed. In some areas there were fortifications, but in many places they were insufficient. Rommel prepared a detailed report. His recommendations: lay more mines on beaches, increase anti-tank obstacles, deploy Panzer reserves close to the coast. The third recommendation was the most controversial, because at that time, in German doctrine, Panzer reserves were kept in inland areas. Wherever the enemy landed, they would be directed there. But Rommel, based on his Africa experience, said, Allied air power is very strong. Panzers get bombed while moving. They're destroyed before reaching the beach. Therefore, we must keep Panzers close to the coast, must counterattack in the first hours. This recommendation conflicted with Western Commander Field Marshal von Rundstedt, Rundstedt's view, panzers should be kept inland. After Allied landing location is determined, they should be directed there. Two field marshals had two different strategies, and Hitler remained indecisive between them. February 1944, Rommel sent a report to Berlin. Atlantic Wall insufficient. Reinforcement essential. Especially panzer deployment critical. Hitler read the report, then asked for Rundstedt's opinion. Rundstedt's answer: Rommel's analysis is exaggerated. Atlantic Wall is strong enough. Panzer strategy conforms to current doctrine. Change unnecessary. The conflicting recommendations of the two field marshals put Hitler in a difficult position. What should he listen to? Rommel had experienced Allied air power in Africa. His experience was valuable. But Rundstedt was more senior and experienced. World War I veteran, Eastern Front commander. Hitler sought compromise between them. Panzer reserves will be divided. Part under Rommel's command, close to coast. Part under Rundstedt's command, inland. A third part under my direct control. This decision pleased no one. Rommel: panzers divided. Insufficient strength anywhere. Rundstedt: reserves fragmented. Flexibility lost. And worst of all, panzers under Hitler's direct control couldn't move without his personal approval. This would lead to disaster on D-Day morning. March 1944, Rommel met with Hitler again, requested he change panzer strategy. Hitler: my decision won't change. Panzers will remain divided. Rommel: but the first 24 hours will be critical. Panzers must move immediately. Hitler: panzers will move when necessary. Don't worry. Rommel was worried, because when necessary was vague. Who would decide? When would they move? But he couldn't object to Hitler anymore, because trust between them was already weak. April 1944, Rommel was working intensively in Normandy. Fortifications were being strengthened. Mines were being laid. But during the same period, whispers about Rommel were spreading in Berlin. Some Nazi officials said Rommel was in contact with opposition circles. Was it true or slander? It was unclear, but it was reaching Hitler's ears. And Hitler was becoming paranoid. Even before the July 20th assassination attempt, Hitler didn't trust some generals. Rommel became one of these generals. May 1944, Rommel was called to Berlin for the last time. Meeting with Hitler. Agenda: D-Day preparations. At the meeting, Hitler asked, Rommel, can you stop the Allies on the beach? Rommel: if we counterattack in the first 24 hours, yes. But for this I need panzers. They must be able to move immediately. Hitler: panzers won't move without my order. Rommel: but if we can't get approval in time, we'll be late. Hitler: you won't be late. I will decide in time. Rommel wasn't convinced, but couldn't speak up. After the meeting, Hitler to those close to him: Rommel is too anxious. Maybe he's aging. Maybe his morale is broken. This comment was cruel. Rommel was 52 years old. He wasn't aging, but he was realistic. Hitler, however, was disconnected from reality. He thought Atlantic Wall is invincible. Rommel's concerns seemed like exaggeration. This difference in perception would lead to disaster on D-Day morning. June 1st, 1944, Rommel was at La Rocheguyon headquarters. Examined weather reports. A storm was expected the following week. Rommel to staff: Allies will wait for good weather. We're relatively safe for a few days. June 3rd, Rommel planned to go to Germany for his wife's birthday. At the same time, he hoped to meet with Hitler and reopen the Panzer issue. June 4th, Rommel went to Germany. But the same day, Allied meteorology experts determined that weather on the morning of June 6th would briefly improve. Eisenhower made his decision. D-Day, June 6th. June 5th night, Allied fleet began crossing the Channel. French resistance started sabotage operations. German intelligence caught some signs. At Rundstedt's headquarters, some officers were anxious. Maybe we should recall Rommel. But Rundstedt: weather too bad. Allies can't land. June 6th, Allied paratroopers began landing. The situation was clear. Allied landing had begun. Urgent meeting at Rundstedt's headquarters. Decision: mobilize Panzer reserves. But which panzers? The 12th SS Panzer and Panzer divisions under Hitler's control were the strongest. But Hitler's approval was required. Hitler's first reaction: is this a real landing or diversion? Officers: at 5 beaches simultaneously. Very large. Must be real. Hitler: maybe the main attack will come to Pas-de-Calais. This could be diversion. This hesitation cost 4 hours. At 1400 hours, Hitler finally gave approval. Panzers can move. But it was too late. Allied air forces had secured air superiority. Panzers were bombed on the road, arrived late to Normandy. Evening, when Rommel returned to headquarters, the disaster was obvious. Beaches were lost. Panzers were scattered. Rommel received the report. Why didn't the panzers move in the morning? Answer: waited for Hitler's approval. Rommel: why was approval delayed? Rommel was angry. But at whom should he be angry? Hitler? Himself? The system? June 7 to 10th. Rommel tried to stop Allied advance in Normandy, but resources were insufficient. Panzers were arriving scattered. Air superiority belonged to Allies. June 15th, Rommel sent a report to Berlin, the loss of D-Day and reasons. What he wrote in the report: the first 24 hours were critical. Panzer reinforcement came late. Reason: delay in chain of command. Hitler's approval was awaited. Approval came too late. This report indirectly criticized Hitler. Hitler read the report, became angry. Rommel is blaming others again, trying to cover his own failure. But Hitler's circle noticed something more dangerous. Rommel was questioning the system. June 17th, Hitler came to France. In Soissons, met with Rommel and Rundstedt. Rommel spoke directly. Normandy can't be held. Allied superiority is too great. We must withdraw. Hitler: no withdrawal. Continue defense. Rommel: but military reality. Hitler: not military reality. Matter of will. If you're determined enough, you can stop the Allies. Rommel: well, doesn't replace tanks. This answer greatly angered Hitler. A field marshal was criticizing the leader's strategy to his face. The meeting ended tensely. Hitler returned to Germany. Rommel to his staff: Hitler doesn't see reality. The war is being lost. These words were dangerous because Hitler's agents were everywhere. July 1944, a decision was maturing in Rommel's mind. Hitler was dragging Germany to disaster. He must be stopped. But how? What exactly did Rommel know about the July 20th assassination plot? This is a question historians still debate. What's certain: Rommel's circle was connected to plot. Chief of Staff Hans Speidel was in contact with conspirators. He must have told Rommel some things. But did Rommel directly participate in the plot? Probably not, because Rommel's approach was different. Not assassination, but arrest. He would arrest and try Hitler, then conduct peace negotiations with Western allies. This plan was naive. The Allies wouldn't make peace except for unconditional surrender. But Rommel was hopeful. July 10th, Rommel wrote a letter to Berlin. To Hitler, the content was harsh and clear. The situation in Normandy is out of control. Our loss is 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers daily. No reinforcements coming. Allied air superiority is paralyzing all movement. Militarily, Normandy can't be held. Political solution must be sought. The last sentence was dangerous. Political solution. This meant peace negotiations. For Hitler, this was treason. The letter was sent to Berlin, but before reaching Hitler, agents copied it, recorded as Rommel's first treasonous document. July 15th, Allied fighter planes hit Rommel's headquarters. Rommel was seriously wounded, skull fracture, removed from command, sent to Germany for treatment. July 20th, assassination attempt on Hitler failed. Conspirators were arrested. Interrogations began. Early August, during interrogation, Rommel's name came up. Speidel was questioned. Some conspirators said Rommel knew too. Evidence was unclear, but for Hitler it was enough. Rommel was on the suspect list. October 1944, Rommel was recovering at home, but the situation was bad. Normandy was lost. Paris had fallen. The German army was withdrawing to the Rhine, and Rommel was no longer commanding because trust was lost. October 7th, the Gestapo came to Rommel's house. Message: Berlin was calling Rommel. Rommel knew what this meant. After July 20th, generals who were called didn't return. October 14th, 2 generals came to Rommel's house. They brought a message. There are allegations you were involved in the July 20th plot. We offer 2 options. Either you're tried in people's court, or you commit suicide. If you commit suicide, your family will be protected. There will be a state funeral. Your reputation will be preserved. Rommel chose suicide because he wanted to protect his family, and the people's court would turn into a disgrace. Accusations would be used for propaganda. October 14th afternoon, Rommel took poison, died within half an hour. Official announcement: Field Marshal Rommel died from complications of the wounds he was being treated for. October 16th, a state funeral was held. Hitler sent a representative wreath. Germany bid farewell to the Desert Fox. But the truth, Hitler had Rommel killed because he didn't trust him. And this distrust had begun with D-Day. Now, let's return to the central question. Did Hitler-Rommel distrust really lose D-Day? Yes, but it wasn't the only reason. It was a combination of several factors. First factor: Panzer delay on D-Day morning. The most critical Panzer, reserves waited for Hitler's approval. Approval was delayed 8 hours. Why? Because Hitler had given full authority to neither Rommel nor Rundstedt. He kept it under his own control. And on the morning of June 6th, Hitler was sleeping. No one dared wake him. Result: Panzers came after Allies had consolidated the beaches. Late. What would have happened if Rommel's proposal had been accepted? If Panzers had been on the coast? Maybe they could have counterattacked in the first hours. Maybe they could have thrown the Allies into the sea. Maybe, but not certain, because Allied air forces were very powerful. Panzers waiting on the coast could have been bombed too, but the chance would have been higher. Second factor: strategic indecisiveness. Hitler couldn't decide between Rommel and Rundstedt. Partially accepted both their proposals. Panzers were divided. Result: insufficient strength anywhere. If Hitler had fully trusted one, Rommel or Rundstedt, that commander would have implemented a consistent strategy. But there was no trust. Therefore, a hybrid strategy was implemented, and the hybrid strategy didn't work. Third factor: chain of command delay on D-Day morning. Critical decisions were made with delay because authority was unclear. Rundstedt couldn't move panzers. Rommel was in Germany. Hitler was sleeping. Result: 8 hours lost. And those 8 hours determined D-Day's fate. If there had been trust between Hitler and Rommel, if Rommel had been given full authority, Rommel would have been in Normandy on the morning of June 6, would have made instant decisions. Maybe it still would have been lost, but the chance would have been higher. Some historians say distrust is important but not decisive. Their counter-arguments. Counter-argument 1. Allied superiority on D-Day. The Allies had overwhelming superiority. 150,000 soldiers, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft. German defense was too weak to stop the superiority. Even if panzers were on the coast, Allied air power would have crushed them. Counter-argument 2. Geographic reality: Germany was too weak to defend the entire French coast. Normandy, Pas-de-Calais, Brittany, everywhere couldn't be defended simultaneously. The Allies chose the weakest point, Normandy. And the weak point was weak independent of distrust. Counter-argument 3. Strategic deadlock. In June 1944, Germany was in strategic deadlock. In the east, Soviets were advancing. In the south, Italy was lost. In the west, Allies were ready. Resources weren't enough for everywhere. With or without distrust, Germany had to distribute its resources. These counter-arguments are strong and probably partially correct. D-Day might have already been lost for Germany. Distrust only accelerated the loss. But what's important is this: Small details can produce big consequences. An 8-hour delay allowed Allies to consolidate on the beaches. Consolidating on beaches was the first step toward Normandy success. If panzers had come 8 hours earlier, maybe the Allies would have been thrown into the sea at Omaha Beach. If one beach had been lost, the landing might have failed. Maybe not. But maybes are history's interesting questions. Why didn't Hitler trust Rommel? First reason, past disobedience. Rommel hadn't fully obeyed orders in Africa, ignored Berlin, defend order, and attacked. At El Alamein, violated the stand your ground order. In Hitler's mind, Rommel was recorded as undisciplined, successful but uncontrollable. Second reason, criticisms. Rommel openly criticized Berlin, complained about resource insufficiency, naval forces failure, strategic errors. Hitler had no tolerance for criticism. He thought critic is not loyal. Third reason, political naivete. Rommel acted with military logic, ignored political calculations. Hitler was a political leader. Every military decision produced political consequences. Rommel didn't understand this. According to Hitler, Rommel was a good soldier but a poor strategist. Fourth reason, July 20th suspicion after the plot. Hitler became paranoid. He viewed all generals with suspicion. Rommel's circle was connected to conspirators. This made Rommel suspicious. Hitler thought maybe Rommel is also betraying, and lost trust completely. These four reasons together explain Hitler's distrust of Rommel. But the ironic thing, Hitler's distrust actually made Rommel oppositional. Initially, Rommel was a loyal general, but Hitler's distrust, constant suspicion, pushed Rommel away. In July 1944, Rommel really said Hitler must be stopped. But the reason he said this was because Hitler didn't trust him. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Why didn't Rommel trust Hitler? First reason, strategic blindness. Rommel saw that Hitler's strategic decisions were wrong. In Africa, resource insufficiency. At Stalingrad, stubborn defense. In Normandy, Panzer division. Every time, Hitler's decisions led to disaster. Rommel saw this. Second reason, reality denial. Hitler ignored military realities. Said, "Well, conquers everything." Rommel had experienced this delusion in Africa. Well, didn't replace tanks. Well, didn't stop Allied air power. Hitler was disconnected from reality. Rommel had understood this. Third reason, soldier loss. Rommel was fighting at the front. Every day, he saw German soldiers dying. Hitler was in Berlin, making strategy on maps. Saw deaths as numbers. Rommel felt responsibility toward his soldiers. Hitler's decisions were killing these soldiers unnecessarily. Fourth reason, understanding the war was lost. In June 1944, Rommel understood. The war was lost. Germany would be defeated, but Hitler was still saying victory, saying miracle weapons. Rommel saw reality. Hitler didn't want to see. These four reasons explain Rommel's loss of trust in Hitler. This distrust produced concrete results on D-Day. Result 1. Panzer delay. Hitler's approval was delayed 8 hours. Panzers arrived late. Allies consolidated beaches. Result 2. Strategic indecisiveness. Panzers were divided. Insufficient strength anywhere. Result 3. Command chaos on D-Day morning. No one could make definite decisions. Authority was unclear. Result 4. Rommel's absence. The most experienced commander was in Germany at the critical moment, because he thought weather is bad, no landing. These four results accelerated D-Day's loss for Germany. What would have happened if there had been trust between Hitler and Rommel? Scenario, if there had been trust. Full authority would have been given to Rommel. Panzers would have been deployed according to his strategy. On D-Day morning, Rommel would have been in Normandy, would have made instant decisions. Panzers would have moved 8 hours earlier. Perhaps Allied consolidation on beaches would have been more difficult. Would D-Day still have been won? Probably not. Allied superiority was too great, but the chance would have been somewhat higher. And in history, small chances can create big changes. What actually happened? There was no trust. Panzers were delayed. Normandy was lost. France was lost. Germany was defeated. And Rommel died in October 1944. forced to commit suicide because Hitler didn't trust him. The cost of distrust was heavy. A general's life, thousands of soldiers' lives, and perhaps the course of the war. History isn't written with what-if questions, but what didn't happen is as instructive as what happened. Hitler-Rommel distrust is a leadership lesson, a coordination lesson, a trust lesson. Leaders must trust talented commanders, but must also be open to criticism. Commanders must be loyal to the leader, but not blind obedience, intelligent loyalty. Hitler and Rommel couldn't find this balance. Both made mistakes. Both paid the price. And D-Day became the symbol of this imbalance. On the morning of June 6, 1944, on the Normandy coast, the distrust of two men changed history. The Allies won because Germany couldn't coordinate, and it couldn't coordinate because there was no trust. This is the story of Hitler and Rommel, and the story of D-Day's loss. If this story affected you, please hit the like button. Every like helps us reach more people with these forgotten stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. America, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. This community is spread across the world, and every viewer here plays a role in ensuring history isn't forgotten. Thanks for watching.